Hi and welcome to Pastor's Devotions for this week. And today we're going to be looking at 2 Corinthians chapter 2. And in particular we're going to read from verse 12 through to verse 15. So let me just read and then we'll dig into the devotions for today. So 2 Corinthians chapter 2 beginning in verse 12. When I came to Troas, put this as Paul writing here, to preach the gospel of Christ, even though a door was opened for me in the Lord, my spirit was not at rest because I did not find my brother Titus. Did not find him there. So I took leave of them and went on to Macedonia. But thanks be to God, who in Christ always leads us in triumphal procession, and through us spreads the fragrance of the knowledge of him everywhere. For we are the aroma of Christ to God among those who are being saved and among those who are perishing. Verse 16, to one a fragrance from death to death, and the other a fragrance from life to life. Who is sufficient for these things? Who is sufficient for these things? So Paul here is obviously on his journey, and they came to Troas, village, and the purpose to go there was to preach. Obviously, he was looking to catch up with Titus and couldn't find Titus, and basically made the decision, as he said, he just wasn't quite there in his spirit. Like, there was a bit of unrest there, and he just had to go and find, Titus. So he left that place, even though the door was open for him to preach the gospel, which is interesting within itself. Went and found Titus and was able to work with him there. But verse 15 is interesting. It says, for we are the aroma of Christ to God among those who are being saved and among those who are perishing. We are the aroma. Now, when we think of aroma, we can think of things that smell pleasant, and we can think of things where smell does not smell pleasant. We can have a rubbish bin that stinks really, really badly. I don't know about you, but these green waste bins, our bin stinks. Like, it's good when I cut the grass because I put grass in there and it seems to nullify the smell, which is great and wonderful. But generally the smell is still in there, especially the week later as you open it up again and there is that waft of, stench coming from it. But what is really, really fascinating here is that Paul describes believers as a sweet-smelling aroma of Christ or of God. Again, verse 15, for we are the aroma of Christ to God among those who are being saved and among those who are perishing. There is something about us, a fragrance, that is life to those who believe, sweet-smelling aroma, and it's death to those who reject. So the question is, who is that aroma? What is that specific smell that makes an impact for both believers and unbelievers? And the answer is really interesting because he follows that by making this statement here in verse 17. Verse 16. To the one fragrance leading from death to death, the other from life to life. Who is sufficient? Who is sufficient for these things? And later on, Paul in 2 Corinthians, in last week's passage, we saw this, touches on the verse where Jesus responds to Paul, who was saying, I've got these people, thorn in my flesh, something needs to be done. You have to do something. And he 3 times he prayed to God for him to intervene. And God's response to him was, my grace is sufficient. So when we think of the aroma, what it is that sets us apart, what makes us have that fragrance of our life that is tasteful, that is sweet, and best represents God. And the answer to that is not our good works. The answer to that is not our human effort. The answer to that is Jesus Christ. Because only he is sufficient. Only in him can we be the people that God has, called us to be. It's only in Him that we can follow after God. So an encouragement for us is that this life that we have, this life that's been given to us in Christ, we just love Him, walk with Him, and the amazing thing that comes from it is that we then can make an impact in the society in which God has placed us in. We can make a difference in people's lives by purely being the example that God has set for us to be, and that is in Christ Jesus Himself. Because only in Him can we be anything of what God would have us be. He who knew no sin became sin for us, so we may become the righteousness of God in Him. He covers it all. Covers our sin, covers our differences. He covers everything. And then draws us into a relationship with Him, works in and through us for the furtherance of the kingdom. And that's the beauty of this passage for today. Because at the end of the day, we are an aroma. We'll either be smelling great in our walk with Christ, or sadly we won't be. And there'll be a stench, and it will be repulsive. And people do not respond to repulsive Christianity. They respond to the Christianity that is genuine and that is real. That is centered on Christ, empowered by Christ, and for the glory of Christ. And that really is the call for the church. Each and every one of us, whether we mingle with believers or non-believers, our lives must be lived in complete obedience to the will of God. And when we do that, it means we're walking with Him, we're talking with Him, and we're living life with Him. And when we do that, my word, the Lord will do great and powerful things. But until then, may we remember that our lives ought to smell, but they must smell very good, not very bad. We are an aroma because of what Christ has done in our life. And I pray that we can grow from that. God bless everyone. Have a wonderful remainder of your week.